The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
I'm in South Africa to find truth. In a country where farming is one of the most dangerous jobs on earth.
Soulmate is our Google.
Bullet went in here, came out here.
Where cities are crumbling.
The visible deterioration of South Africa.
Where the men prepare for civil war.
We need to prepare for whatever is coming.
A few thousand litres of diesel there.
And the wives fear for their lives.
You're not safe. You're never safe.
You'll probably come and kill us.
Where leaders and criminals stand hand in hand.
Everything that you own, it's ours. Our people are at war in farms now.
It's without compensation.
A nation at boiling point.
But there is a genocide coming in South Africa. And within 5 years, a civil war will begin in South Africa.
And I'm here to tell you why.
Hi, welcome. My name is John Sylvia. It's first show here that we're starting with Table Talk, and Carlos is going to be on the show with us, but apparently he was held up a little bit. So I'm going to get this started without Carlos because I've been doing a lot of research on this topic of South Africa. We have so much news going on in the United States, and a lot of times here we only cover what's going on in the U.S., and you know, I understand that because that's what we're familiar with, that's what we're aware of. But what's been going on in South Africa over the last 20 years or so is that commercial farms in the country have been under attack. The video that you saw previously was from Lauren Southern. She has done a documentary. She's putting a bunch of videos together to create a movie called Farmland. So you saw the first, the trailer of that. We're gonna be playing another video that's gonna be talking about wives that live on these farms when the husbands are working on the farms. They're by themselves a lot of times. These farms are huge. A lot of folks takes roughly 20 to 30 minute car ride to see your neighbor, so they're way out in the sticks. So it really leaves them open for attacks. About probably 5 years ago, from what I read, they used to have a rural police service there, but they had to cut that out for budget reasons. So a lot of the South African police service, they are in certain towns and they can be 30 minutes to an hour away. So if something does happen, these farmers are on their own. So if they're by themselves or they got 3 or 4 family members and 20 people come in, you know, they're to their own devices. Security in the country on the whole, basically there are more security services, private security services, than the police service, the South African police service. They're overwhelmed with crime. The country itself, 55 million people in this country, and there are roughly 17,000 murders per year. That's along with the farmers, and in the cities, There are some really big cities there: Cape Town, Johannesburg. They're probably equivalent size to, say, Chicago. So you can imagine 17,000 murders. The police are pretty much out-tasked or are outnumbered. That's why a lot of folks have private security firms, and they have their own cars that they come in. They can use weapons, guns, and stuff like that, and they are counted on a lot of times in court cases. But I just wanted to show a little about what's going on there, because it seems to be over the last, and I've been following this for about 6 months now. It seems to be over the last 6 months, or last 3 months. I've been following it for like 6 months. The last 3 months, it has got a little bit worse. And what's happened is that there is a political party in Parliament called the EFF, the Political Freedom Fighters. They, and along with the ANC, the African National Congress, those are the two pretty powerful parties. They've wanted for years to expropriate land from private citizens without compensation and redistribute that to the citizens. But they want the government to hold it. So it's somewhat of a communist kind of thing. But there's been an uproar with this because some of these families have been on these farms for generations. A real quick history is back in 1652, the Dutch East India Company sent some Dutch settlers and to basically set up a refreshment stand for folks that were headed over to over to India and China as they crossed the Cape. And what happened was people then started coming from Holland, from Germany, and settled in there. Probably 100 years later, the British came in, and the Dutch were not too happy living under British rule, so they started moving inland. When they moved inland, they encountered different tribes that came in from the north, and that started their whole history. Then I think around 1913, they started the Native Land Act, and that really pushed the whole apartheid regime and apartheid in Afrikaners, which is the Dutch language there, or version of the Dutch language. Apartheid means separate. So they segregated the white South Africans from the black South Africans. They had to live in very poor townships, and the white South Africans lived in the cities. And they were the minority in the country, but they had everything. South Africa is a first world country, but then if you go out to some of these townships, people don't even have running water. So fast forward, 1994, Nelson Mandela became the prime minister. Apartheid was ended, and there was a push to move things along. And the ANC government, I think they did as well as they could at the time. They brought in folks. They brought in different kinds of programs where folks could get into government jobs. Before apartheid, it was all whites that were in government, so they kind of changed that a little bit. And on top of that, they created government housing, single-family homes that had hot water, running water, sanitation. But I believe they've only built like between 5 and 7 million units. There are 55 million people in this country. And also, what's not really told a lot is that South Africa is kind of a beacon for Africa. So they get a lot of illegal immigrants. And that's what happened basically in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe had commercial farmers there. They were kind of run out of the country. The government took their land over. If they wouldn't give it back, they were killed or put into jail. So that created, put that country into a tailspin. They were the breadbasket of Africa. And when the farmers went away or were pushed away, people that worked on the farms were unemployed, and a lot of them went into South Africa because that was the beacon there. But with that brought more problems to South Africa. You get more people coming in that they can't support. But I just wanted to talk about some of the things. What's happened is there is I don't know if it's would you say a monument, but what they call Plasmar, which is farm murders. They have a monument, I guess, or it's up on a hill in South Africa, and they have a cross there for every farmer that has died over the last 20 years. And it's a pretty amazing sight to see. Every day, they're bringing a new cross in, and these crosses have the farmers' names on there, the date they were born, and the date they were murdered. So it's a pretty significant sight there. Back in November, the farmers had really seen an uptick in these murders, and they had a nationwide protest that blocked the highways and everything. It was called Black Monday, and they really just were pushing toward the government to tell them, this has got to stop. We got to stop these farm murders. On top of just the whole murder of people, it threatens their food security, because if you take these commercial farmers out of the loop, right now South Africa feeds their own people, and they also export their overage of food to other countries in South Africa. If this farm murder thing continues, and I believe now there's roughly 30,000 farmers in South Africa, if it continues, it could push a point where there are no more farmers left, commercial farmers left, and that could really spark a food security shortage or a food shortage in that country. But I wanted to just also get into, there are murders in this country, there are murders in every country. But what's happened with these farm murders are the brutality, the pure brutality behind it. It's, I didn't want to bring in videos and place them, because literally looking at, pictures. Literally looking at these pictures, it looks like something out of a horror movie. I'm just going to talk about one murder specifically, and I've got a couple, but this one just happened recently. And it was a woman and her husband. She was a British woman, so it did get a lot of airplay in the UK. She was a resident of South Africa, but she was a British national, so it did get airplay there, and it got airplay across Europe. This woman, 64 years old, and her husband were asleep when they were attacked in their farmhouse near the trout village of Dullstrom around 3 a.m. on Sunday morning. The attackers broke into the house through a window and demanded cash. A lot of people have safes out in these farms because they can't get to the bank all the time. When the couple told them they did not have any money in the house, the assailants pretty much had a blowtorch on them and blowtorched the husband and wife. The husband was stabbed in the stomach, the hands and the neck, and then the wife was blowtorched in the face. The attackers then forced the couple into a pickup truck before driving them away from the farm. When the attackers drove off, they threw the husband out, but not without stabbing him again. They later threw the wife out, and before they threw her out, she had numerous stab wounds, and she was blowtorched as well. They stuffed a paper bag down, a plastic bag down her throat. Luckily, the husband was able to see where this was, because it was not that far in the way of length. He crawled over to her, and they both crawled into the street. Luckily, a passerby picked them up, but unfortunately, the wife did not survive. She was blowtorched. I can tell you, I saw this picture in the British news. It was horrific. They literally, can you imagine a blowtorch using that on a 65-year-old woman and her husband, and then threw a bag down her throat and left her for dead there on the side of the road. There were so many murders like this. It's absolutely horrific in this country, and we don't have that's something out of a horror movie, but this stuff is happening. I was reading a publication in the South Africa, where they talked about murders, where they say if they're just shot, that's really not that bad of a murder. That it just does not happen that way anymore. So this is stuff you don't hear on the news. What you probably did hear on the news here is that the new Prime Minister, Ramaphosa, he was brought into power. The guy on the screen is Julius Malema, and he is part of the EFF Economic Freedom Fighters And that's a party in Parliament like we have in Congress. But the EF leader here, Julius Malema, basically was pushing for expropriation of land without compensation. And he was really pushing the ANC, the African National Congress Party, to push that. So this new Prime Minister, Ramaphosa, has pushed that they are going to do that. They have sent something forward, and a special committee within Parliament has to get back to the President by August to see how this is going to go. In the interim, as soon as that passed through Parliament a couple weeks back, there have been numerous land grabs within the country. Folks have been driving out to the bush or out in the country on these farms. Thousands of people have been doing this, and they've been setting up ropes on people's land and stating, this is where my house is going to be. Now, there are folks that own this property. They call the police, but as usual, the police are outnumbered. When you have 1,000 people trying to get to this land, you're kind of outnumbered in this instance. So they're doing the best they could. But after that started happening, weekend after weekend, they were going over to people's farms, staking out, putting up rope, starting to build sheds and all sorts of things on the property. The Prime Minister came out and said, we can't do this. You know, we are a country of law and order. We're going to work out this expropriation of land without compensation, but people will be prosecuted if they go in and try to do these land grabs. But again, it's kind of like the cart was put in before the house. I mean, before the horse, I'm sorry. So, of course, when the government's saying this, it kind of does open it up for people to just say, hey, they're going to do it in 6 months. I'm going to do it on my own. So that when you watch that news, it's really upsetting. Can you imagine being in America and, you know, basically the most powerful party in America, say, would be the Democrats, or now the Republicans. And the Republicans come in and say, we're going to take land from, say, the Democrats. We're going to take that. We're not going to give you any compensation for it. And we're going to change the Constitution even if it's illegal. And that's basically what's going on there. Again, like I was saying, folks have been there for hundreds of years. The first Dutch settlers, like I said earlier, came there in 1652. There's a lot of rhetoric in the country where people are telling folks, you're settlers, you don't belong here, you're visitors here. If you don't like it, leave. And that comes back to even in this country. Myself, I had family members that came here during the Great Migration from England in 1640 and 1650. And then I have another side of my relatives that came here from Portugal, the Azores, in the 1900s. I can't imagine anybody telling me to go back to Europe, where you're from. I don't have any connection to Portugal other than what I see, and I'd love to visit it. Same as England. I've been there twice, have no connection to that country, and I can't imagine somebody telling me to go back and live there. I have no connection whatsoever. So that's basically what the folks are dealing with in this country right now. What I wanted, we also have another video, and I you know, this video is, again, from Lauren Southern, who is putting all these videos together to do a farmlands, to talk about the country on the whole, what's going on there. This video really kind of got to me, and you'll see why, what's happening. These are two wives that are living on the farm. Again, some of this farm land goes 30, 40 miles out that they have to work on. So the wives are left alone during the day, obviously. But what their homes look like were amazing, absolutely amazing to me. So we'll let you check that out, and I'll get back to you once the video's over. Enjoy.
It's often said that hard times build strong men, and I've never seen that so in play than in the lives of South African farmers, who prevail through drought, through crime, and the threat of government seizing their lands. But through all the stories I've heard from these strong men, I couldn't help but think of their families. Every day these farmers go out on their land for long hours, often leaving their loved ones at home. And given the horrific nature and increasing frequency of farm attacks, I wanted to hear from these women about what it's like to be a South African farm wife.
In this country, if you're living on a farm, you're not safe. You're never safe. You've got to lock yourself up at night, especially if you're home alone. Just to sleep easy, I just lock the gate, get the gun out, put it on my bedside table. Otherwise you don't fall asleep, you just sit in stress and you can't fall asleep. I sleep with the gun next to my bed at night in case someone breaks in and maybe tries to murder us or steal something. It gives me a lot of anxiety and it makes me feel uneasy about raising a child in this country. I've been thinking about moving to maybe New Zealand or somewhere where it's safe, but then you lose your your religion, your culture, your family, your friends.
One of these women, in fact, had already seen a farm attack take place at their home. Miss Haas and her children were there when her husband was attacked and shot in the face.
I woke up one morning and heard a terrible noise. My son and my little daughter were in the house, and I don't know why, but I just screamed. It happened so fast. I ran to my bedroom window and I just saw people jumping over the wall, and it was already over. I went outside and I saw the blood. Only then did I realise my husband had been shot. The marks are still on the wall. You hear about this every day. There's not a week that goes by without a farm attack. My husband survived the attack, but others are not as lucky as us. During the week, I'm alone here. My kids go to boarding school, and I almost never go out. I always lock everything. It's had a huge effect on my life. My fears are for another attack. My peace has been stolen. I just never feel safe in my own home.
Okay, welcome back. On that video, what I was really amazed about is the security measures they have. Both women, it looks like they were in jail cells. They had jail gates there. On top of being behind the gate, they have weapons to protect themselves each night. So I can't imagine that's like living in a war-torn country, basically. There are situations in this country. Roughly 25% unemployment rate. Their currency in the last 20 to 25 years, their currency is the rand. The rand used to be worth $1, 1 rand for our dollar. Now, right now, their currency, for our currency, they get, if we were to go there, 19 rand equal $1 in this country. So they've got some serious issues, and they've got to come around them, but by looking at the way the people are, and there are people that are living in other circumstances that don't have running water, totally unacceptable. But I just wanted to bring some light on this. Nobody should be tortured. There are folks that have their eyes pulled out. There are folks, there was another situation where somebody was hung up with wire and stabbed continuously and then dragged in a truck down the street in the gravel. Nobody deserves this kind of torture, and everybody's got to work together. The government's got to work together to change this. But there's not, all hope isn't lost there. What's happened with Lauren Southern going to South Africa, shedding some light to this, with the British national that was murdered a few weeks back. That's got publicity and airplay in the UK. So people are starting to look at this. Actually, Australia is going before their parliament to see if they can get refugee status for some of the farmers in South Africa, the folks that are more in line to be under attack, violent attacks, than somebody living in cities. And about a day ago, 3,000 people in the city of Perth, Western Australia, had a protest for South Africa, and to push the Australian government to get this refugee status for them. And hopefully that's going to move. The Parliament is aware of this. The Home Secretary there is pushing toward this to help folks, because when you watch the news there, and I listen to the news pretty much every day, listen to their radio stations there are issues that, people are in danger every day. And, what they've told, what some folks have, some of the South Africans have said, this is their country. They've been here for 200 or 300 years. They don't want to leave. Some do. And, I think 4,000 people a day leave South Africa because of the economics and the violence, the sheer violence there. So if you are interested in any of this, I have on Twitter Lauren Southern. There are other folks that are covering this this crisis in South Africa. So if you're interested, just look them up on Twitter. Go on to some of the papers, Google their papers there, or the South African Broadcasting Service is another area that they'll talk about the news and what's going on there. And a lot of times just on Twitter, if you have people on there that'll tell you the story, they're down there, they'll tell you what's going on, because at times this is not covered by the media. Like anywhere, there are so many stories out there. So I hope you enjoyed this show, minus Carlos. Unfortunately, he wasn't here, but this was something that I wanted to bring to light. And we're going to be doing different things like this. We're going to be covering local issues. We're going to also cover things that are happening across the world that we don't usually hear about in this country, but they're worth covering. So I hope you enjoyed the show tonight, and we will see you next time. Thank you.